With these linked benefit types, they're more like a long-term care policy. We can add inflation to it. We can do additional things that make it look more like long-term care. So the life with rider hybrid is more of a life insurance need with some flexibility added. The linked benefit hybrid is more of a long-term care product need. Really good leverage on the long-term care side with a small death benefit.
Are you ready for a successful retirement? We're addressing the topics facing today's retirees. Welcome to Retire with Ryan. Now here's your host, Ryan Morrissey.
Welcome back. This is episode 96. I'm continuing my conversation from last week with long-term care expert Nancy Simm. And last week we covered traditional long-term care, some of the things to know about that. This week we're going to talk about two other options that you may not be aware of, one being what's known as hybrid long-term care coverage, and the other being the Connecticut State Partnership Plan. So welcome back, Nancy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Yeah, so last week we were focused on traditional long-term care, and this week we're going to talk about the hybrid policy. So tell our listeners, for those who aren't familiar, what is a hybrid long-term care policy?
So hybrid, as you would expect, pairs long-term care with something else, which in this case is life insurance.
Okay.
There's essentially, I'll say actually three variations on this. So you can have a life insurance policy and add a long-term care rider, or some companies have a chronic illness rider. It is different, but same general concept. That's one type of hybrid policy. And what that type of policy does is simply, you have your life insurance policy, right, to pay at your death. But with the rider added, if you have a long-term care need while you're living, obviously, you can draw down the death benefit dollar for dollar to pay for your long-term care needs. So it makes it a dual purpose policy, right? Just X amount per month comes off of your death benefit. You could use the whole thing. If you die halfway through, the rest is still tax-free death benefit to your heirs. But it's a nice way to kind of, for small, relatively small cost, add that flexibility to a life insurance policy. The other type of hybrid life long-term care policy is what we technically call a linked benefit product. It really doesn't matter that we call it that. Same concept of long-term care and life insurance. Difference being, with the one we just mentioned, the life with the long-term care rider, you can't have an inflationary factor on that. And with traditional products, at most ages, we're adding an inflationary factor because the cost of care keeps going up, right? So we want something that's going to kind of increase over time. The life with a rider, we can't have that. It's going to be a set amount and the same amount today and same amount in 10, 20 years. So incrementally going to pay for less care because the care costs rise, right? With these linked benefit types, they're more like a long-term care policy. We can add inflation to it. We can do additional things that make it look more like long-term care. So the life with rider hybrid is more of a life insurance need with some flexibility added. The linked benefit hybrid is more of a long-term care product need. Really good leverage on the long-term care side with a small death benefit. Typically, what I mean by that is the death benefit on these linked hybrids is really just intended so that if I never have a long-term care need, like we talked about in the last session, I happen to be one of the 30%. If I never have a long-term care need, the death benefit will pay back to my estate, in most cases, all the premiums I paid in. So there's no loss of money.
Sure. You're probably not getting interest on that, right? So I guess that's the loss, but at least, yeah, that's the fear people have. I buy long-term care insurance. I never use it. You know, I'm that 30%, as we said last episode, 70% of people that live to 65 will have some need for long-term care help. It might not be full-time nursing home, but maybe it's in-home care, but there's going to be some need. We're all going to have, a lot of us, right?
Yes, exactly. And that's why these hybrid plans have become very popular, because people are like, well, great, if I don't have the long-term care need, because again, we just don't know what's going to happen in our future, I didn't, quote unquote, waste the money. It's not wasted because it's giving you peace of mind. It is insurance. It's what it's intended for. But it's kind of nice to have this option that if I don't have a long-term care need, the money is still coming back. Like you said, Ryan, you lose the time use of money if you want to invest it. But these policies, they're all fully guaranteed. So you know it's going to be exactly what it's going to be. The money is going to be there. The premiums are guaranteed. So unlike the traditional policies where the premiums can go up and down, you know what it's going to be. You can pay them up. Usually it's in 1 to 10 years, but some companies now have 15 or 20 years. There's a couple companies that you can pay every year, just like a traditional policy if you need that. but you can have them paid up and done if you want, so you don't have to keep thinking about paying this bill. And in addition to the long-term care benefits and then the death benefit, they all have some variation of a return of premium feature. What that would be is simply like you buy this policy in 10 years, 15 years, whatever from now, you decide, I wish I hadn't done that. I gave this company all this money. And for some reason now, I did hit lotto and I have $50 million to my name now. I don't need this policy. Or there's something better in the market that didn't exist back then. I wish I hadn't put my money here. These linked plans have options for canceling your policy and getting back all or a good portion of the premiums. So again, more flexibility. There's just a whole lot of things that could be good about that. And then the final thing I want to mention before your next question is on the traditional policies, I think we talked about there being reimbursement plans, typical insurance.
Oh, yes. We didn't really get into that, but yeah.
You send in the bill, you get reimbursed what they can up to your limits. With these hybrids, there are a few that are reimbursement, but the majority of them are cash or indemnity plans, which simply means at claim time, you don't have to prove services. You don't have to submit bills. You can use whoever you want to provide the care. So in a reimbursement plan, typically you need to use licensed caregivers, a home health care agency. With a cash plan, you're going to get cash. You're going to get X amount per month to use as you want for your care needs. So you could pay your spouse, pay a child, pay a neighbor, hire somebody of your own, maybe at a lower cost than coming through an agency. Who knows what they're doing still, but it just gives, again, there's additional types of flexibility with all these newer plans.
Okay, so I guess indemnity would be preferred, right? If you had your choice, because if you've got like $5,000 a month, do they literally just send you a check or make a direct deposit for $5,000 a month?
Exactly. So we all have our own biases, right? I like the idea of cash because the simplicity. Like how many people when they're older really want to be going back and forth with the insurance company to get reimbursed? I also like it for younger clients because the way I think about it is there's a whole lot going on in the healthcare industry, especially home care stuff with sensors, with robotics, with AI, like all kinds of new things being invented to help take care of people at home. If you have a cash plan, it can pay for whatever. If you have a reimbursement plan, it's listed in the contract what it will pay for. So personally, I like cash, but I've run into fewer, but some circumstances where somebody will say, I don't want a cash plan. I don't want this X amount that can be used for whatever coming into my house. Usually it's because of some family issue, like there's somebody with a gambling issue or an addiction, and they're afraid the money is going to be not used for their own care, go out the window and something. So again, very specific, like we talked about last time, as to what is this client's specific needs and situation to find the right plan.
Okay. So I think you mentioned there were 3 of these. We covered 2 of them, right?
Oh, yeah. I was testing your math skills, Ryan.
All right. My math, it's still okay.
Still okay. In the linked world, there is also very few, like 2, annuity and long-term care linked plans.
Where like an annuity that would guarantee you a certain amount of monthly income, would it give you more income if you had a long-term care event, like maybe double it? I've seen that, right?
Yep, exactly. And I also wanted to mention before, well, that was the annuity linked products, but on the life linked, whether it was life with a rider or linked life with a rider, linked life plan, long-term care plan, one of the things that sometimes people don't think of for funding it is if they have an existing life insurance policy that they don't really need anymore.
Like a cash value policy.
Cash value, not term, exactly. But a cash value plan that they've still been holding on to. They don't really need it anymore for the purposes they originally bought it for, but they're just holding on to it. They can do a tax-free, a 1035 exchange of the cash to help fund one of these life-linked plans because they are life-based.
Sure. So that could maybe fully fund it if they had a large cash value plan, or maybe you could offset a lot of the costs that you'd be paying, right?
Exactly.
Okay. So let's just talk a little more about an example of one of these life products, life hybrid long-term care. So you'd specify the death benefit, I guess. So let's say you said, all right, I want to have $400,000 of coverage. So you'd get a policy that had a $400,000 death benefit, and it would also have the same amount of long-term care coverage. Is that how it works? Or
that would be true for the life with rider, where it's more of a death benefit need, but you're adding the flexibility. That's exactly how you'd go about it. As the linked benefit one, the ones that are targeted more for the leveraged up benefits for the long-term care needs, it's typically one of 2 things. We're either solving for the premium amount that's needed exactly like a traditional policy. We want, $200 a day, $6,000 a month for 4 years. We want it to have an inflation factor. What will that cost me? Either it's a single premium or over 10 years or whatever. Or some people will say, I have sitting on the sidelines in cash or whatever, a few $100,000. What can I get if I take 100,000 of it? What will that get me into this plan? So that's usually sort of the way we see those, a little different aspect going back and forth to them, but different ways you can look at it.
Okay. And is that benefit still for its long-term care? It's not taxable to you when you receive that?
Really good question. Correct. So they are all tax qualified plans. So that means that when you get the benefits, you actually get the full amount. It's not taxed. Yeah.
Okay. We didn't get into it last episode, but I believe with traditional long-term care, based on your age, there's a certain amount that you could potentially deduct on your taxes as a medical expense, or you could take out of an HSA tax-free to pay for the premium. I'm not going to hit like what those numbers are. Just be aware, listeners, that is possible. But is this the same thing? Like if you bought one of these hybrid policies, do any of these premiums fall under that?
So really good question. Again, I'm going to have a kind of caveated answer. So yes, for just to touch briefly on the traditional policies, like you said, people can potentially have part or all of their premium be tax deductible. For individuals, it's typically never when they're buying it. It might be later in life. And the reason I say that is you have to have other health expenses that put you over 7.5% of AGI.
Yeah, so that's pretty hard for a lot of people.
To then get an age-based dollar amount for the premium that they can deduct. So I said, maybe not today, but maybe in later years, you've retired, your income has gone down, your health has got worse, and then it could work. So as far as that, and payable through an HSA, as you mentioned, just key for a lot of folks who just got a bunch of money stuck in their HSA. For these hybrid policies, there is no deductibility for the life with a rider, because that is truly a life insurance plan just with a rider. On the linked benefit plans, the ones that are more focused on long-term care that still have a small death benefit, it depends on the carrier, the company offering it. A couple of them break out the premium, so they allocate a certain portion for the long-term care, and then that has the same possibility to be either tax deducted or paid through an HSA. If that's an interest, you just want to know that up front so that you can target the right company that offers that.
Okay. So it sounds like this too has underwriting, right? Just like any life insurance, I guess, right?
Right. But again, different. So last time we talked briefly about the traditional policies, you have to have had a recent exam and they're going to get your doctor's records and they're going to review them, see if you qualify. The life with a rider hybrid, it's primarily going to be your life insurance underwriting. So you're going to have your exam. They're going to get your doctor's records. They're primarily going to look on the life insurance side first, see where you fit, and then make sure nothing kicks you out for the long-term care rider. On the linked benefit hybrids, very different. So there is no exam. Majority of the time, they do not get any doctor's records. These plans, they're still underwritten, but what it is it's an accept or reject kind of policy. So either you're going to get exactly what you've seen in an illustration, or you're not going to get it at all. And it's underwritten through a phone interview. So you don't have an exam. They're not getting your doctor's records. There's very few questions on the application because they're not asking all the health questions. They're going to ask them on a phone interview. They're going to do a pre-screen or a prescription check. So they know what medications the person's already on, and they pretty much know why and what dosage. But that's going to be one of the questions. So the phone interview is going to be, what doctors do you see for what reasons? What medications are you on? What does your day look like? At certain ages, there's going to be a cognitive recall test. The interview is the whole process. So people have to kind of take it seriously. I always tell people, sometimes when you're talking to clients, we all like to joke about, I think it just scares us. That's why we joke about it. Dementia, right? So everybody's always like, oh yeah, I'm forever walking into the next room. I can't remember why I went in there. And the clients will tell me that as we're talking about, you're going to have a phone interview for this product. And I'm like, now I get that you like to be funny, or we all say this. Do not do that during your phone interview, because they will take it seriously because they're not looking at your records.
Yeah. So they asked you, the president, is make sure you answer correctly.
Make sure you kind of ahead of time.
It's not Carter. So
right. Yeah, they might be a little worried about that though.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like these are other options for people that either are concerned about paying for something they're never going to use, potentially, right, was the traditional route, or maybe they can't get approved for a traditional policy, or they have like an existing life insurance policy that they, like you said, they don't need it for the coverage, right? Their family's grown, they don't have any debt, and they just want to reposition that. Maybe they could reposition that into one of these products.
Yep, those are perfect places for these products. And sometimes it's just that person who has a set amount, of their plan. Like, we've got this amount set aside in case there's a long-term care need. Well, if we can make it worth more, or only take part of that and free up the rest of the money, that's also great. Just kind of, again, moving around the assets.
Correct, because they're obviously getting some type of leverage on their money, right? It's not a one-to-one, like you get $1 of coverage. Maybe what is the leverage they're getting? An average, maybe.
Sure. Again, it's going to depend on gender and age and all of those things. But, if, let's just say, for an example, they had $100,000 and they want to do a one-time paid-up deal. And $100,000 with a company, again, depending on whatever, maybe the death benefit is 130, 150. The long-term care is, say, let's just use the 130 number. The long-term care is going to be 260 or 390. You're going to, depending on how we devise the plan, there's going to be 2-3 times leverage on it. So 100% makes sense to leverage up. Yeah.
Sure. So you're getting some benefit. If you had the need in the next, it's obviously you could do the math, how long it would take you to catch up to there investing your own money, but it would probably be a while to get back to that, if ever, right?
Yeah, it would. And also, these are all guaranteed. So to get the after-tax amount that you would have to invest in something not that risky to make sure it was there is going to be difficult.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. So let's switch to our third option we mentioned, which would be using one of these partnership plans, these long-term care partnership plans. So we had talked a little bit about the Connecticut partnership, and I think there's been some changes to that. But before we talk about the changes, maybe just talk about how that works and what that is.
Okay. So this would go back to our traditional long-term care policies, the standalone, because they're the only ones that can have a Connecticut or other state partnership program. Partnership in general, it's a partnership between the state and yourself. So what I would mean by that is you buy a long-term care insurance product, a traditional product. The state is going to say, thank you for buying something, because otherwise what they see is people spending down all their money until they're poor and go on Medicaid. And of course, Medicaid is a huge cost to state and federal government budget. So the state's going to say, thank you for buying something. You bought this long-term care policy. You bought a partnership policy. So we are going to give you sort of a credit, think of it, for having bought something instead of just blowing all your money and going on Medicaid. So typically what happens is whatever the policy pays out. So let's say you bought a policy, $200 a day for a 3-year plan, whatever it was, $200,000 today's dollars. You used it 20 years from now, so it was worth $500,000 that got paid out to you. It was your policy, and then you lived too long. You didn't have a big enough policy, is the concept here, right? So you've used up all your policy. You still need care. That's when you normally would spend down money and go on Medicaid. The partnership says you've earned dollar for dollar asset protection. Whatever the plan paid out to you, so in my example, $500,000, is now protected assets. So instead of spending down, if I have $600,000 to my name, instead of spending down $600,000 to get to the Medicaid level, I get to keep $500,000 of it. Okay, so that's sort of my credit. I get to keep that. I could pass that money on to my family or whomever and apply to Medicaid that much sooner. Now, there were 4 original partnership states, Connecticut being one, New York, California, and Indiana. We've sold a lot of partnership policies in the past in Connecticut and New York. Right now, New York has no partnership policies available because the companies that were offering them have stopped. Connecticut's pretty much in the same boat. There are 2 companies, and without saying anything bad about any companies, there are 2 companies that I would not put anybody with currently because of their financials.
Okay. The company's financials, right? They have lower credit rating or something, right?
Yep. And so in today's world, not great options in Connecticut or New York. A lot of other states, though, more recently, in the past 5-8 years, have come into the partnership as well. So if you already have a Connecticut partnership plan, that's great. If you move to another state, most of them have reciprocity now, so you could actually use it in another state. So there are still some good things to it. There's just not much for buying into it today.
Sure. I think when I researched it 6 months ago, there were 43 other partnership states. Maybe that number is wrong, but it's about there. So there's a lot. Almost every other state you could move to. If you had one of these and you purchased it, or you're looking to buy one, and you'd have the same coverage, Medicaid protection.
Right. Exactly. And that's really nice for folks retiring to other climates or having second homes somewhere else, things like that.
Okay. So if somebody was interested in this, they'd have to right now roll the dice, I guess, with maybe buying one of these Connecticut companies. Probably not a good idea, because I guess the concern is that the company goes out of business, right? Or they go bankrupt and then they don't pay the claims or pay all of the claims that they issued.
Right. And I mean, we really haven't had that issue in the past because what we've seen with carriers is most of them just aren't offering new policies. They're big companies that are still big, viable companies. They've just decided to get out of the marketplace for these plans. So that's why there's not ones available so much today. As far as carriers going under, we really, again, haven't seen that. Typically, if a carrier wanted to get out entirely, they've sold their book of business to another carrier. There's one carrier who actually did go under, one we never dealt with again because their financials weren't strong enough. We would never have recommended them. That's always something you want to look at. Or work with, somebody like you, Ryan, who is going to look at this good companies. You don't want to put somebody with a bad company just because it's cheap, because you kind of get what you pay for. So if there is a company that, something ridiculous happens in the future and one of these companies does actually go under, there is in every state a state guarantee fund, which will provide X amount of coverage per policy. And it does vary by state. So it might be 200,000, it might be 300,000, whatever. So there's still some backup to that. So people don't really have to worry about it that much because there's always going to be something.
Okay. So I think originally, weren't there 8 partnership plans in Connecticut, or 8 companies that were issuing it?
Oh, yes. Yeah, we've had a lot of companies in the past that had issued these. And like I said, if you have one now, that's great, because even if they're not offering it now, you have your contract, your policy is a contract. And when you go on claim, you will earn your asset protection.
Yeah. Okay. So, I think we've covered a lot. Is there, so if someone's looking to start figuring out, all right, does long-term care coverage make sense for them? Like, how do you recommend they start that process?
So really, it's just, getting some information to you, Ryan. What is their specific situation? Married, not married, female, male, children around, not around? What state do they live in now? Do they have another state they would retire to? What is their health? Key. We always want to pre-qualify on the health. I've had far too many people go through the process, decide between the different options what they really wanted, and then find out they can't get it. We could have, avoided it up front. That's easier. Or we could direct them to what might be the best choice for them because of whatever situation they have going on. So just having that conversation, having them tell you some things, having them provide some information to us, and we can look at it and see, here's what we would recommend, and then we can change it around as you want. I would say a couple of the things that might be considerations or people particularly want to think about this. I think everybody should look at it. If it doesn't fit for them, cost-wise or in their plan, just say no.
Sure. At least you've looked at it, right? At least you've decided. And hopefully when your health is better, right? Because the longer you wait, you have more health challenges that could come up and make it either too expensive or you not even, you can't even get it.
Right. So always smart to look at when you're doing any kind of planning. I would say that particularly women, because women account for 2/3 of the claims because we have longevity, right? Women tend to live longer than men in today's world. So doesn't let men off the hook. You still count for 1/3 of the claims, but women particularly do want to look at it because also in a lot of relationships, the woman is a few years younger, more likely to be on their own. So there's a whole lot of discussion now about solo agers. So solo agers being either people who never married, widowed, divorced. Those people have less other people around them to help out with, right? There's not a spouse or somebody right there able to help them. So solo agers, women a bit more than men, partners with some larger age differences again, because again, chances of being on your own are more key. And even, higher net worth clients. A lot of times people will go, I got all this money. I don't need to worry about it. If you can take a small portion of your assets to protect all the rest of them with that leverage, people with a lot of money make some smart decisions. This would be one of them. So I honestly think that most people should consider it, see if you can get it or not, see if it makes sense in your plan or not, but at least do the work to find out.
Okay. Well, I think this is a great place to stop. We've covered a lot here on long-term care, which has been awesome. Thank you, Nancy, so much for coming on, sharing your wisdom. And, we'll have to have you back for a future episode. So I'm sure there's a lot we still didn't cover if we could do that.
I'm sure there'll be other concepts that come up, but thank you, Ryan. It was a pleasure.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You should consult a financial advisor familiar with your specific circumstances before you make any financial decisions. Nothing in this broadcast constitutes a solicitation for the sale or purchase of any securities. Any mention of rates of return are historical or hypothetical in nature and are not a guarantee of future returns. Ryan Morrissey, CFP, is an investment advisor representative of Morrissey Wealth Management, LLC, a registered investment advisor.